Elizabeth is here. Meg Quinn.
Lori Beal.
And Maya, are you on mute?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. All right, so that gives us a quorum. Okay, so we'll move on to first order of business, and that is an update from Sustainability Partners from our request from last week. So Ryan, will hand over to you or whoever you want on your team to talk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate the invitation to come back in front of the committee to talk about this topic and what we were able to find. And then I've got a presentation that I'll give, so I'll share that in a minute. We won't need to probably go around to do two formal introductions, but just real quick, with my team joining me tonight, I have Connor Goss, who is an infrastructure specialist supporting our projects here in New Mexico. He's also supporting some of the other work that we have up in Angel Fire. We have Maya Rodriguez, who's part of our New Mexico team. She's down here in Albuquerque. She handles a lot of our operations here for the state. Brian Figenshow, he's calling in from California, but he supports on a lot of our product vetting and business development support. And then Allison Wallace as well, who's another infrastructure specialist with our team.
Okay. One quick thing, Ryan. So we normally have an hour, but today we only have 30 minutes. So hopefully that gives you plenty of time. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll run through this real quick. And you'll have to, and just like you just did, please just holler if there's a question or a point of clarification needed throughout any of this, because I can't quite see it. First of all, can you see the presentation in front of you on the screen?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So, I won't take up too much time on this. This is just a quick background on our service and our service delivery model, which is infrastructure as a service. I think some of the pertinent points to this that are relevant to this particular project is that we'll be able to cover the upfront cost on the units that we're exploring with the village in this proposal. Also, we try to align the usage fees as best we can with the revenue streams coming in. And in this case, it would be the rent that the tenants would be paying. So we're trying to create a sustainable model on that as we move forward on the pricing. There's not going to be any markup on goods or services. We're a cost plus entity. And then, we can, in our service model, we can provide expedited funding as well as project rollout, which is really critical. I know in particular for this first phase of this project, we've been reviewing the project scope and engaging with different manufacturer partners on this to try and meet the need that the village is looking for to get units on the ground and in use this year. And we believe there are a couple of options for that. On the step-by-step customer timeline, and we'll come back to this later, the one thing that really is in both of our favor right now is this timeline has already been expedited for the village because we already have a project underway. And so some of these steps have already been taken before, and they apply to this. And that includes a review of financial statements, initial estimates on other projects. We actually already have a master utility service agreement in place with the village. And so where we're really at right now for this project is identifying what are the details that are needed for a service addendum to get that in front of the village council and get executed. And then we can really get moving on steps 5, 6, and 7, which are gathering all the details and information needed to get to a notice to proceed, which would result in a PO to the manufacturer to get the units underway. And so typically that process takes a couple of months. And so we want to allow for that in this case and build that into the timeline. So I just sort of say that as we move forward, if there's any questions on sort of what our anticipated timelines might be. To address specific questions that came from last week's meeting, we did engage and went back to all the information that we had on the 4 vendors. This is on Modular Solutions, which is an entity that we engaged with about a year ago on a potential solution for Angel Fire. We updated the numbers and tried to make sure everything was apples to apples comparison on the per unit cost. But what I wanted to do was just kind of do a run through of the different vendors, the solutions that they brought forward that are matching what you're seeking right now, and then just highlight some of the critical elements of that. So the modular solutions company is a true modular fashion. And so one of the things for efficiency of cost that they had put forward was to do like fourplex units. So they have the ability to do commercial units as well as duplexes, fourplexes, and create efficiency of cost in there. In that sense, you do get central heating and cooling, and there's some other upfitting that can be done in terms of creativity in the floor plans. But the downside is that adds to the cost. There is not included in this cost, there's a design engineering element to this in order to get this to manufacturing, and that takes sometimes 3 to 6 months to get design engineering done. The other aspect of it is that drives a lot of the per unit cost that you see in front of you is the delivery and installation, because it has to be sort of assembled on site and in a true modular fashion. There's an increased cost on the site work that needs to be done itself. So for the 2 1-bed bath, or the 2-bed 1-bath units that we were scoping, they came in at around 728 feet square foot for the per unit, and then on a per unit cost. And we account for them when we were doing our costs. This is sort of an all-in cost. So it's the base cost of the unit. We've included contingency in here, delivery, installation, tax, as well as accounted for long-term replacement of these. And so that is kind of what the pass-through cost would be. On a 2-1 unit would be around 1746. For a 3-2, that jumps to 2307 just because the units are a little bit larger. And so there's more materials costs that are associated with it. I will say that from our review on this, we've kind of eliminated this as an option because, like I say, there's a design engineering element of it that would eat into the time, and they wouldn't be able to deliver a unit this year on the time frame that's been provided.
And that per unit cost, is that like what we would interpret into like a monthly rental cost?
So yes, one thing to keep in mind is this does not have anything in it for the cost of the dirt, which we have already
Right.
spent.
Right.
It doesn't have the infrastructure, the site prep, all of that. We're considering that essentially sunk cost. Like, we're not
Okay.
trying, this is not a money-making opportunity for the Village of Angel Fire.
Right.
But that number is what the village would be responsible for every month that unit's on site.
Okay.
So we have the option to potentially buy down some rental rates to subsidize these. Some of the other communities around there are doing that, but understand that comes at a cost. So
Right.
this is the number from Sustainability Partners per unit.
Okay, per unit, good, Phyllis.
I'm sorry, say
That
again?
the village has to pay.
Correct, every month.
No matter
So,
occupancy, whatever.
correct. So once those are on site and have a C of O, it's number of units times that. That's
Okay.
what the village would be on the hook for.
Okay, all right, great, thank
Do
you.
those- do those prices include the foundation that those would then be set on, the modular house would be set on?
So those do not. So that's a cost that we had to estimate yet if we were going to move forward. But because these are modular units, they would have a more robust foundation needed. So that would have to be something. Now we can account for that, but that's just going to move that number even higher.
So you're talking about a full perimeter stem
Right.
wall foundation as opposed to in a manufactured, a pad site,
Okay.
right?
Okay,
Correct.
all right. So at this point, this one, because of the timeline, this is, at least to your point, eliminated as a recommendation. We still, as a team, need to consider it, but okay. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
I mean, it is a good option. Look, it's a good option for density, right? Because this was a side by side. They can do, an over under for even greater density within it. We've actually scoped this company out for commercial buildings, right? So I think it is an option for the environment and what the village might be looking for in future phases. But for timing needs right now, this just wouldn't be a feasible for this phase 1 as it stands.
Okay,
The same thing is with, and I don't have a slide for them, but I'll just speak to them, to JH Homes, which is out of Roswell. I did speak to their owner earlier this week, and they have an interesting line. They have several different options, some in configurations, some that are sort of what you would consider like a single truck unit to bring in in a modular fashion. The pricing on a per square foot basis is similar to modular solutions. But they have more configuration. So they would do more standalone units. Now, JH Homes doesn't do multiplexes. So they would, at current, they just offer single standalone units. But they do offer a range of options in it. The challenge that they have is they don't have the workforce and the factory lines to be able to manufacture that number of units. So they have more standard floor models, so they wouldn't require a robust or lengthy design engineering phase. They just wouldn't be able to manufacture because they just don't have enough capacity at this point. So again, another great company. That one's local as well, so we could probably save on transportation costs. They have some unique designs as well that might really fit the aesthetic that you're looking for, but just the timeline and the time frame would eliminate them really from being able to meet that sort of accelerated frame or schedule that you're looking for right now.
Okay. Okay.
So those are the two modular companies. Now we're moving on to the manufactured ones, which both of these would be able to meet that time frame. And they have a range of options. And so we've scoped this. The first one I'll go talk about is Champion Homes. And so we scoped a 2-bed, 2-bath, as well as a 3-bed, 2-bath, similar fits and finishes. Per these, I would say the elevation that you see there in the floor plan is for the 2-2 unit. That one, because it only has the 2 bedrooms, has space in front for a feature of a porch addition. The 3-2, when they get lengthy like that, they don't have that included. But there's always ways for us to add on a side dormer with a little deck alongside this. So there's lots of ways that there can be sort of upgrade options and aesthetic options for the village. These units are Energy Star rated. This particular design has some features like tray ceilings in the living room. This one comes standard with black Whirlpool appliances. They have a variety of different lines, but this is sort of a middle to low middle of the road line from Champion Homes. And so those per unit costs that we were able to scope, and this includes delivery and installation, as well as, again, the contingency and all the other features for the long-term replacement costs, and a little under $1,200 per unit. And what I'll point out there is there's not really a price difference. It's negligible between a 2-2 and a 3-2, right? Like you're really kind of just picking and choosing what your preference is versus a drastic difference in the cost. I did ask about a 1 bedroom unit on this just to see if it's remarkably lower, and you might save $100 a month on that, but it's still you just don't save a lot. There's not a lot of cost efficiencies in going down to a 1 bedroom unit.
And what is the footprint? Like 16 by 4, or that we're talking about for a pad?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's 16 wide. I can try and pull that up. I don't know. Connor, do you have that handy, or Brian?
And these do not require foundation. They require a pad and skirting. So
Correct.
okay.
Yeah. So
Just
this
for
would be set up in that.
Okay.
And there are options for skirting, and there's also ways to sort of incorporate landscaping and other things to make it look more natural. And that's something that certainly is considered when you're developing a site like this with multiple. And the other thing is on the aesthetic options, you're adding a few different colors and whatnot, so they don't seem all the same look exactly the same, is definitely something that I think should be considered.
Just to jump in quickly, the exact dimensions here, footprint of this document at the bottom, including the porch, is 64 feet long and about 15.5 wide. And without the porch, it would be 58 feet long, same width.
Okay. Yeah, we'll need that for the layout plan.
Correct.
Okay.
And then the last one, or the 404 is Clayton Homes. We went ahead and scoped a couple different just to kind of let you know how the size difference of the low end versus the higher end finishes kind of influence the per unit cost out. So Clayton Homes has, they have again different lines that we can kind of look at for preferences on aesthetics. There's ability to add on other things at the doorway, like a dormer over that with a little deck, et cetera. So there's lots of ways to kind of look at that. This is just their standard base, what computer rendering of what this would look like. These have a little higher rating on the R rating for efficiency. This particular line also comes with what they call DOE Zero Energy Ready. So it's ready to receive solar panel additions to offset that, to achieve zero, energy offsets in the future should the village decide to pursue that, or if there's an ability to kind of look at that. They do appear to be a little bit more energy efficient from that perspective, as opposed to the black appliances. The stainless steel appliances in this spec were standard. One major difference between Clayton and there's not a lot of difference, but one difference that we would point out between Clayton and Champion is that this model at that price includes the gas heat option already there. With the Champion homes, we would have to work out auxiliary heat, and typically that would run in the probably add about 7 to 8% to that cost previously, because with the standard heat that it's coming, just probably wouldn't be sufficient for the winters in Angel Fire.
And that auxiliary heat would be more electric, right? There is not a gas option with Champion.
That is our understanding, yes.
And gas option could be propane. I don't know if that's any different than residential.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's just a.
And then
Okay.
similar to this, again, variety of footprints, variety of aesthetic options for skirting and other things that we can sort of add on. But on the cost here, you can see the per unit cost. If we were with like the very entry level of this line, it's a little bit lower than the Champion homes, especially considering that we'd had to add a little bit of cost for the heating on the Champion. Again, really nominal difference between a 2.2 and a 3.2. If you jump up to a higher end, you're looking at probably roughly $10,000 more in cost per unit. So that equates to roughly $70, $80 difference in the per month cost. And there might be a lot more creature comforts there or aesthetic value into that. So just kind of knowing that, really what it comes down to is just the preferred manufacturer and some of these other things, especially the heat options, energy efficiency, and then from there, we don't find a lot of difference between it. So I would say for timeline next steps between all of those, knowing to be able to deliver it this year, we're really deciding between Clayton and Champion. Some of the things that we would want to know moving forward is as soon as possible to try and decide like which vendor manufacturer. The type of detail from then would be like what unit model would you like? In particular, what's the composition, 3.2 versus 2.2s, and how many quantities, although we roughly know what that is. All we really need to know at this point is like what are the major aesthetic features that might drive costs. So if you wanted to add a deck outside, if you wanted to add a dormer, that might change the cost. What those might look like, as well as on the heating and HVAC needs, just because those might be major drivers to influence how much capital cost we need to account for. And then just a rough high level schedule. Some of the other things like skirting options, finishes, colors, some of the, that's something that we would work out before we would want to get a notice to proceed, but we have time to kind of do that as we sort of dig into some of the other details on each of these manufacturers, including their warranty options, et cetera. One thing we would point out is we would want to work with the committee and with the village to just confirm the annual maintenance needs, budgets, and responsibilities, what is being covered under our maintenance bucket and what we're accounting for, and then what might you want to account for and include in the rent, just to have a bucket of funds available in case something breaks that's not covered under all the other responsibilities within it. But that's just something that a detail that can be worked out over the next couple of months, and then we can really dive into the detailed schedule and contingencies related to the project. I would say, going back to the timeline, realistically, it would be ideal to have sort of a decision from both the committee as well as the overall council by the end of March or at early April. And that will give us, a couple of months to May into June to work out all of these final details that we would need to, as well as get all of the contracts in place that we would need to move forward. That still gives us plenty of time to get the units manufactured and have delivery beginning as early as July. And then I think August and September are really those key months where we would be targeting, because that's probably the time where the site work will really be aligning well with the delivery of the units and having somebody on site to do all the hookups and installation for that. And that still gives us about a month cushion before we're really at risk of some severe weather coming in that might disrupt any of the schedules on that. So
back to Clayton real quick, again, just clarification, those are manufactured homes. What is the footprint on those?
I will pull that up. Roughly the same.
Yeah, can you forward that, your slideshow, to either Rocky so he can get it to us?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's,
Absolutely.
okay.
And did you
Okay.
ask about delivery in the mountains?
We have, yeah, no, when we were talking with them, they're very aware where the location is at, and so we've accounted for that. I mean, I think this is not something that's new. Like
Right.
these types of units are delivered up there, so the roads are certainly able to. Although certain times of the year you might want to go one way and not the other way. But the weather there would be the driving factor, right? We wouldn't want to be getting into the months where you might have potential severe weather that might make it adverse conditions for any of the truckers, which, again, that's going to align with when you're not going to be able to do much site work as well. But, the calendar is pretty critical as it relates to this, and the coordination on when the sites are prepped and when they can receive the units will also be a really important step.
And you said Clayton said they'd probably manufactured theirs in Fort Worth?
For this line, yes. The ones that they do here in Albuquerque are a little higher end model, and it's not so much the higher end. It's just they're designed a little bit more for owner occupied as opposed to units that might be rental. So a key difference, for example, would be in these units, the walls are made of a gypsum board panel that looks like a regular wall, but it's in a panel fashion that can be replaced if it's damaged. Versus the ones in Albuquerque, they're taken textured just like most of the homes would be. So repair and maintenance cost for that, if it gets damaged, is going to be a little bit more onerous and expensive.
And delivery, because it's in Fort Worth, is that a big difference? Delivery fees?
The delivery would be a little bit more, but it's the unit that we're probably going to need. We're negotiating that right now, and because of the quantity that we're looking at, I think we're going to be able to get to affordable price. We overestimated in the cost that we provided, just to account for that. But if we're able to scale that back because we're at cost, then we'll be able to bring that unit cost actually down.
Okay.
Okay, so we have 6 minutes. So thank you so much for that information. Appreciate it. And get a point about forwarding the slideshow to us so we can have that information in our back pocket. Our next item on the agenda is discuss the housing mix with possible vote on accepted mix. I'd like to table that just because I think we need to have our discussion. The Planning and Zoning Committee needs to have their discussion and make some decisions there before we can really decide on what the mix is going to be because of the way things would lay out and everything. So does anyone else have any other questions for Sustainability Partners? Or I did have one question. There was one of the manufacturers that we didn't ask you to evaluate, but was on our list, was Fading West out of Buena Vista. And I don't know if you already had a relationship with them or not. I don't know where we got their name from. But anyway,
You got it from us. Yeah, you got it from us. We included that. We've had conversations with them. And we've got Brian Figgenshow actually on the call right now who knows about more. He's been the one that has been engaging with them. Do you have any specific questions or just want maybe an overview of what their product was?
No, I think we've looked at the materials and everything. I just couldn't remember how we got them. Their name and that if you had a relationship with them. So if we had to come back and say, can you look at them? I mean, you already have established relationships. You could do that. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. That sounds good. Okay. All right. Anyone else? I'm sorry. Any
No.
questions from the committee members?
That was a great slideshow. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody from the audience have any questions? Comments?
I have a quick one.
Sure. Go ahead.
Kevin Ricketson. I was just wondering, is there like a target rent that you guys are shooting for to not exceed that kind of a thing? Is it?
There is not. One of the things we're looking at is several of the surrounding communities that have workforce housing are subsidizing, some lightly, some heavily, their rents for different, police officers or firefighters or those types of things. So that's going to be an evaluation that we're going to have to do. But before we can figure out, can we afford to subsidize, we've got to pick a vendor and figure out how much headroom we're playing with essentially on the costs here.
Okay.
Most of the, if you look at the answers from the employee, the general village employee, not the employees of the village, they would love to have rent under $1,000. Now, whether we can accomplish that or not is
Right.
the story, but that is what the majority.
But
I
there's
would say
not been
it's
like any
40%.
studies to say like, this is the median income of who would be renting these houses. This is what they can afford and all that kind of stuff.
So Rockies, if you want to speak to kind of what you're going
Yeah.
through right now.
Yeah, well, we have
And that's okay.
there's a median income that the Mortgage Finance Authority has stressed in the grant application that we've accepted, okay? And it's a formula, and I have I calculated one person in one person family, 2 people in a household, 3 people in a household, 4 people in a household, and it scales that way. I have those detailed numbers, but not with me right here. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'll give you at some point and kind of
Yeah.
go through some of that maybe.
Okay.
And then the only other thing I had here was on the modular selection. I noticed there that you had wood stove, central heating and central cooling in them. Is that all necessary?
I don't know that maybe those were just the options. I don't think we're not going to.
Well, that's
Yeah,
slide
that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, so this was an initial phase just to provide what the options would be for it. The other thing, what we ultimately what we're trying to do is match what the need is for the village. And so we can always back down and back out those costs. If we were to move forward with like a modular solutions, then we would go down to the same level of granularity that we would with Clayton or Champion, which is what is the specific things you need, where can we cut costs, what's the best fit, and then what provides the best value overall for the village.
So you're saying on the modular solution, you haven't went to that level of detail, but on the manufactured homes you have?
That's correct. And that's because the modular solutions from a time perspective wouldn't be feasible for this particular phase. Whereas we're starting to dig into that on the manufacturers because they've come back and said they actually can meet that time frame.
And I had a quick question related to the time frame. So we've as a committee and guidance from the council, we've been talking about trying to get some housing in here by October. Was there anything related to our grant that had a specific timeline? We have to use that money by a certain time, or is that part of driving it, or is that a preference for our timeline?
The grant specifies 24 months.
Okay,
We're well within that.
okay.
Okay. And then just more quick one for you guys, and you don't have to answer this here if you don't have it right off the top of your head, but you mentioned useful life on these things, and I was just wondering what the useful life was on the different options. Is it 10 years, 20 years, that kind of thing? You can,
Yeah. It's a great question. We actually break it down more than just the unit. So we're actually looking at the useful lives of the roof, of the appliances, of the walls, of the windows. And so what we're trying to do is account for what would be the replacement cost in that. And so we balanced that out and built those replacement costs into the usage rate so that when something needs to be replaced, there's availability of funds to do so without changing the usage rate through to the village.
But, so what you're saying structurally then is, as long as you keep replacing pieces and parts, these things should last forever?
Well, forever is a very long time, but yeah, we're trying to reach that multiple decades of this, and honestly, we're looking for improved materials everywhere we can to achieve longer useful lives.
Okay,
Okay, so we're right at 6, so, and I guess I'll adjourn the meeting so we can move on. We have another meeting. Planning and zoning has a meeting scheduled at 6, so, okay, very good. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Just another.
Thank you.
Oh, do we need to schedule another
Yeah.
meeting? Probably we do. How about those 2 weeks between the 22nd and the 4th? Sometime between there. So we can so have the discussion from planning and zoning and then ask for it to consider, and then we'll come back.
Yeah, Monday the 24th? It's available. Does that work for you, Elizabeth?
Yeah, it'll be fine. Okay.
And can we set the agenda later?
Yeah, I'll have an agenda to be determined. Can we do that as long as we publish it?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, all right. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, what are we looking at?
Monday, the 24th,
Okay, 5:30.
at 5:30, yes.
Thank you.
All right, meeting adjourned.